Okay, let's unpack this. You live in St. Johns County, Florida. It's, a place experiencing incredible growth, beautiful beaches, historic city, really desirable.
Absolutely. A lot going for it.
But maybe, like many residents here right now on May 31st, 2025, you're also feeling a significant financial squeeze.
Yeah.
Housing costs are just soaring, and naturally you're asking, where are my tax dollars really going?
That feeling, that financial pressure, it's absolutely real for a huge number of residents in the county right now, no question.
Absolutely. So today we're jumping into a deep dive, really getting into the financial landscape of St. Johns County. We've been sifting through the material you shared with us, reports, analyses, budget details, some investigation findings, proposals for improvement, quite a stack.
Yeah, and our mission in this deep dive really is to cut through the numbers, the jargon. We want to understand the key fiscal pressures facing the county.
Right.
And see what kind of oversight structures are already in place, identify areas where things could potentially be more efficient, maybe more transparent based on these sources, and then explore what adopting a really proactive, strategic approach, something like this DOGE-type initiative we've heard about, could mean for the county and, most importantly for you, the resident paying those taxes.
We're going to cover the sheer scale of the county's budget, the very real financial burden you might be feeling right now. Documented instances raised in the sources that bring transparency questions right to the surface.
Yeah, some serious questions there.
And some concrete ideas from the material on how to genuinely improve efficiency, including tackling those significant personnel costs.
Okay, so let's start by setting the stage with St. Johns County's context. This rapid growth, the massive budget, and how it's really impacting your pocketbook. The sources you share, they really emphasize this astonishing population growth.
Astonishing is right.
We're looking at an increase from just over 320,000 residents to nearly 335,000 in a single year. That's a substantial 4.6% jump.
Wow, 4.6% growth in 1 year. That's not just fast, that's like accelerating. And that kind of rapid growth inevitably means escalating demand for public services.
Oh, definitely.
More roads are needed, more safety personnel, schools, utilities. You see the strain everywhere.
And this growth is happening against the backdrop of what the sources describe as a severe housing affordability crisis. The analysis points out that the income needed for a household to comfortably afford a median home in St. Johns County is now around $132,000. This is as of early 2025.
Okay, $132K needed, but what's the median income?
It's only about $108,000. And here's the number that really stands out from the material, that income needed for housing. It has surged by an astonishing 194% over the past decade.
194%. That's not just a statistic, that's a gut punch for residents. The sources say you're now dedicating about 36% of your income just to housing costs.
Yeah, 36%.
Up from only 18% just 4 years ago. That shift alone is a substantial increase you are absolutely feeling in your own household budget.
Exactly. And compounding that, even though the county has maintained a flat millage rate, that's the tax rate per $1,000 of assessed property value, for 4 years now.
Which sounds good on the surface.
Right, but your actual property tax bill is likely going up significantly. Why? Because property values have increased so dramatically, 16.5% for fiscal year 24, and a projected 17.8% for the upcoming fiscal year 25.
Right. The Save Our Homes cap does help homesteaded properties by limiting that specific increase to 3%, which is crucial, but it's still an increase on the tax bill for many.
Still an increase, yeah.
And for properties without that protection or, new construction, the jump is much bigger.
Much bigger. So this economic reality, rapid growth, combined with that feeling of being financially squeezed by rising housing costs and property taxes, it makes residents incredibly sensitive, and rightly so, to how public funds are managed. Every dollar needs to provide maximum value.
Which brings us to the scale of the county's operations and its existing financial framework. We're talking about a truly massive operation here. The fiscal year 2024 budget was $1.66 billion.
Billion, with a B.
And the tentative FY25 budget we're looking at now is even larger at $1.75 billion, which includes about $535 million in capital carryforwards.
And here's where, as the sources highlight, the scale gets really interesting. That $1.75 billion budget, it means that even small inefficiencies add up to enormous amounts of money.
How much are we talking?
The material points out that a mere 1% inefficiency in that FY25 budget represents $17.5 million in potentially misspent funds. Think about that.
$17.5 million For just 1%.
Just 1%. That really underscores the inherent necessity for rigorous, proactive oversight, doesn't it? You can't just assume everything's running smoothly at that scale.
It absolutely puts the numbers into perspective. So looking at the sources, what are some of the major spending areas they mention? Where's the money going?
Well, the FY24 budget included a huge $656 million capital improvement plan. For FY25, specific large projects mentioned include around $35 million for road projects, which, given the growth, isn't surprising.
No, definitely needed.
Over $110 million for a wastewater treatment plant expansion, $5 million for a sheriff's office facility, and $3 million for waterway access improvements. And remember, that's just the county government side.
Right, the school district's separate.
Exactly. The school district budget is also substantial, with hundreds of millions in operating and capital funds. Big numbers all around.
And on the revenue side, where is this massive budget coming from?
Primarily property taxes, as we discussed, which are increasing because of those rising values. Another absolutely crucial source the sources highlight is the tourist development tax, or TDT. The bed tax.
Ah, the bed tax.
Okay, it's collected from overnight stays in hotels, rentals, that sort of thing. The sources state this generates about $24 million annually.
$24 million, and that's specifically earmarked.
Yes, it's vital for tourism promotion, funding things like the amphitheater, beach renourishment, basically supporting the county's largest industry, tourism.
Okay, so that's the scale of operations and revenue.
Mm-hmm.
What about the existing layers of oversight? The sources mention several structures in place, right?
Yes, the county has standard structures. The Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, for preparing and monitoring the budget.
Standard stuff.
Yeah. Then there's the Office of Performance and Transparency, or OPT, which focuses on using data for performance management. And of course, external audits, like those from the Florida Auditor General.
And how did those audits look?
The 2021-22 Auditor General's report, the sources note, gave the county an unmodified opinion. Basically, no major red flags, no material weaknesses found in financial reporting or internal controls at that time.
That sounds like solid financial footing, at least in terms of reporting. Seems okay on paper.
It reflects sound compliance, certainly. There's also the Clerk of Court's Office of Inspector General, the OIG.
Right, the OIG.
The sources highlight that the OIG is specifically tasked with investigating waste, fraud, and abuse FWA across county operations. And crucially, they accept complaints from the public and employees.
So there's a mechanism for reporting issues.
Yeah.
And the county has received recognition, too, for its budget presentation award.
Absolutely. They've won awards for budget presentation for 14 consecutive years, which is impressive. And they maintain a strong AAA credit rating.
Okay, AAA rating awards.
Yeah, these are positive indicators. They show sound reporting and financial stability in terms of, meeting the standards.
So what does this all mean when you look at the full picture presented in the sources? You've got good reporting, compliance, stability on paper.
And this is a key point. The sources really emphasize these things don't necessarily measure the efficiency of every single dollar spent or the affordability from your perspective as a taxpayer feeling that squeeze.
Okay, so compliance doesn't equal efficiency.
Exactly. You can have a well-reported budget that ticks all the boxes, is compliant, stable, but, as the sources suggest, it can still contain areas of bloat or inefficiency that aren't being proactively rooted out.
Just sort of hidden in plain sight within the large numbers.
Potentially, yes. This is exactly why the sources argue a deeper dive is needed to move beyond simply complying with reporting standards and into true operational optimization, especially given the significant financial pressures on residents right now.
And that brings us directly to the pressures and areas the sources suggest need deeper scrutiny, connecting that taxpayer burden to transparency concerns, external pushback, and those significant personnel costs.
Right.
The sources really underline that financial pressure on residents as the core driver for this need for scrutiny. It all comes back to that.
It really does. And the sources point to specific instances that have raised transparency concerns or highlighted potential weaknesses in oversight. They mention the OIG's investigations in general as part of the existing oversight landscape, which is good.
But the material specifically highlights the 2021 abuse of power investigation. That sounds serious.
It does.
Yeah.
Yes, the sources detail that the OIG's IO2 investigation found clear and convincing and founded allegations against a manager in the county's SCADA department.
SCADA? That's the critical control systems, right? Like for utilities.
Exactly. Critical systems. These allegations included using his authority for personal benefit, bid tampering, using unapproved vendors, and instructing subordinates to falsify records.
Wow. Bid tampering. falsifying records in a critical department. The sources use that finding these founded allegations to argue what exactly?
Well, they argue that even if criminal charges weren't pursued, maybe due to a different legal standard, burden of proof, whatever this investigation reveals, potential gaps. Gaps in proactive oversight and transparency protocols that allowed such behavior to occur in the first place. It raises serious questions about systemic issues, not just one individual.
Right. If it happened once, could it happen again? Is the system protective enough?
Precisely. And that kind of finding, according to the sources, can significantly erode public trust. The sources also point to the solid waste contract termination with FCC Environmental back in August 2024. Remember that? Due to performance issues?
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah.
Service problems.
Big service problems. They see this as another example through this lens, an instance of potentially inefficient contract management and oversight that ended up costing taxpayers, requiring a last-minute scramble for a replacement vendor. More potential waste.
And there are concerns raised in the sources even about the budget workshop process itself, like the meetings where they discuss the budget.
Yes, the sources question if these workshops truly address fundamental efficiency issues. Digging deep into whether county functions are structured optimally, whether every program is delivering real value for money,
Yeah.
or if they primarily function as just a mechanism for allocating funds based on existing structures and requests without that deep critical dive into the structures themselves, more about divvying up the pie than checking if the pie is being baked efficiently.
Interesting distinction. Okay, shifting gears slightly, the sources also discuss external pressures that could impact county finances, specifically potential state-level actions.
Exactly. They discuss proposed state legislation like HB 7033, which aim to basically eliminate tourist development councils, the TDCs, across the state.
Eliminate them?
Yeah, and redirect their funds, essentially taking the tourist development tax, that TDT, away from local control.
In St. Johns County's TDT is at roughly $24 million we mentioned,
The $24 million,
which the sources note is vital for tourism, the county's largest industry. So what was the argument against this bill locally, according to the sources?
Right. The sources present arguments from local tourism officials who warn this bill would have devastating economic consequences locally. Absolutely devastating.
Yeah, devastating.
They argue that redirecting that $24 million TDT to property taxes would be an illusory benefit for homeowners. The estimate in the sources was maybe $75 per year per homesteaded property.
$75 a year.
Yeah, basically negligible for most homeowners.
So, according to the arguments presented in the sources, you get a tiny, almost unnoticeable property tax reduction for individual homeowners, but at the risk of severely damaging the county's largest economic engine. That seems unbalanced.
That's the stark contrast presented in the material. They view this proposed state action as a fiscally irresponsible cut from a local perspective. It harms a tax source that pays for itself, basically.
Because tourists pay it.
Right. Tourists pay it, and it supports a key industry that provides countless jobs and businesses in the county. So messing with that for a $75 savings per homeowner seemed counterproductive to them.
And the sources suggest that a local efficiency effort should actually involve proactively advocating against such state policies.
Yes, using local data, showing the impact, arguing why they would be harmful locally. That proactive advocacy is seen as an important piece of a comprehensive fiscal strategy. Protect your revenue base.
Makes sense. Now, another major area the sources highlight for significant scrutiny and optimization is personnel costs.
Yes, always a big one.
This is typically one of the largest components of any large organization's budget, especially in local government, delivering services directly to people.
It is, and the sources explicitly state that personnel costs are a significant component of the county's budget. No surprise there, but they directly recommend a thorough analysis of workforce structures and compensation models.
Okay, analysis is one thing. What specific strategies did the sources suggest within personnel cost optimization? What could actually be done?
They mention reviewing compensation, specifically to better balance cost of living adjustments with performance-based incentives.
Like bonuses instead of permanent raises.
Exactly. Using bonuses tied to specific achievements rather than just granting permanent raises that compound year after year after year. They also highlight the need for careful management of sick and vacation leave accruals.
My leave accruals.
Because those can build up into potentially huge long-term payout liabilities when employees eventually leave or retire. Managing that accrual rate can save significant money down the road.
Okay, performance pay, leave management. And there's a critical point the sources make about how recent hiring practices can inflate spending over time. This sounds important.
Yes, this is a strong point in the material, and quite pointed. The sources state very clearly that selective separation in conjunction with reorganization, particularly by eliminating vacant positions, is a direct and necessary strategy to reduce personnel costs over time.
Eliminating vacant positions. Not just slowing hiring, but actually getting rid of empty slots.
That's what they suggest, yes. This speaks directly to how simply filling roles as they become open, maybe out of habit or departmental pressure, without a really critical evaluation of need, can inflate spending. The sources argue that stopping the filling of unnecessary vacant roles is a fundamental way. Costs must stop rising if true optimization is the goal.
Wow. So they're saying the county must stop just automatically filling empty jobs to get costs under control. That's a pretty direct recommendation.
It's framed not just as a suggestion, but as a necessary action in the source material we reviewed.
Okay. That's a very specific and impactful recommendation coming out of the sources. So given these pressures and the areas needing scrutiny, the very real taxpayer burden, the transparency questions raised by things like the OIG findings and that unitemized legal bill.
Right, and the bid tampering allegations.
Yes, the issues with contract management, the external policy threats like the TDT bill, and that explicit call to tackle personnel costs, including stopping the filling of vacant positions, the sources collectively argue for a decisive, proactive step.
Exactly. This is where the idea of adopting a comprehensive DOGE-type approach comes in, moving beyond just basic compliance and stability.
Which they seem to have.
Right. Moving beyond that to genuine strategic optimization and accountability, getting more value for the money being spent.
So what are the strategic recommendations the sources propose for adopting this kind of approach in St. Johns County? How would it work?
Okay, the primary recommendation is to establish a dedicated task force. Think of it like the state's former Department of Governmental Efficiency, but at the county level.
A local DOGE.
Essentially, yes. The sources suggest this would be a team with dedicated experts, focused specifically on rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. They'd conduct deep spending reviews, rigorously evaluate programs, asking, do we need this? Can it be simpler? Can we right-size it? Can we stop non-essential work?
So really questioning everything.
And working to amplify existing, maybe scattered, efficiency efforts through cross-department collaboration, breaking down silos.
So a group whose sole mission is to find and fix inefficiencies, armed with the authority and expertise to actually do it.
Precisely. That's recommendation 1. Recommendation 2 is to implement targeted operational audits across key areas.
Where would they focus?
Procurement is highlighted as critical here, reviewing practices to ensure genuine competition and value, and specifically scrutinizing things like alternate contract sources or piggybacking off other contracts.
What's wrong with piggybacking? Isn't that sometimes efficient?
It can be, but the sources warn it can also be used to prevent what they bluntly call end runs around competition. They explicitly mention addressing risks like friend-of-friend syndrome or potential political donor influence creeping into procurement decisions. Needs tight controls.
Okay, that speaks directly to the transparency and trust concerns we discussed earlier regarding how public money is spent, who gets the contracts and why.
It absolutely does. Operational audits would also include that focus on personnel, reiterating the need for a detailed workforce analysis and implementing those specific cost optimization strategies we mentioned.
Performance pay, leave management.
And critically, that focus on eliminating unnecessary vacant positions. And leveraging technology is key too.
How so?
Using AI and data analytics more effectively, improving online services, maybe a single portal for everything, chatbots to answer common questions to reduce manual workload and demand on staff time, and just modernizing outdated systems generally.
Makes sense. Recommendation 3 is centered on enhancing transparency and public engagement, right? Making things more open.
Absolutely. The sources strongly stress the need for more detailed reporting for the public. They use the example of the commissioner's legal fees again to underscore why itemized billing is essential for controversial or significant outlays.
Show us the receipts, basically.
Exactly. It's seen as a fundamental step needed to rebuild public trust by showing exactly how money is spent. They also suggest enhancing public performance dashboards, not just data dumps, but making data easily understandable for residents.
So people can actually see how the county's performing.
Right. And creating proactive mechanisms for public input, like surveys, maybe efficiency-focused town halls, and a clear, responsive system for tracking complaints about wasteful spending. Don't just wait for complaints, actively seek input.
So not just putting data out there, but making it truly accessible, understandable, and actively seeking feedback from the people paying the bills. I like that.
Exactly. The fourth recommendation is that strategic state-level advocacy we touched on, using the data and findings from local efficiency efforts to effectively argue against harmful state policies, like that proposed TDT elimination, that could negatively impact the local economy and county finances. Use your own data to fight back.
Okay, so bringing it all together, what benefits to the Sources Project could be achieved if St. Johns County adopts this comprehensive, proactive, DOGE-type approach? What's the potential payoff?
Well, the numbers are pretty striking. The sources project potential efficiency savings of 3 to 5% across the entire budget.
3 to 5% of $1.75 billion.
Yeah. In that FY25 budget, that could represent potential savings of $52 million to $87 million annually.
52 to $87 million.
Yeah.
That's a staggering amount of money. It really highlights the potential impact of focusing internally on efficiency.
It does, especially when you contrast it with that estimated, $75 property tax saving from the TDT bill the sources were so critical of.
Yeah, no comparison. $75 versus potentially $50+ million found through efficiency.
It dramatically illustrates the potential scale of improvement possible through dedicated internal optimization efforts. And beyond the dollar figures, the sources also expect benefits like better allocation of resources.
Putting money where it's actually needed most.
Right. Streamlined operations leading to better service delivery for you, the residents. Increased public trust due to enhanced transparency and accountability. And overall shifting to a more data-driven, performance-oriented approach to county governance.
So to sum up this deep dive into the material you provided, we've looked at St. Johns County's incredible growth and the very real financial pressure it's putting on residents. That housing cost squeeze is real.
Very real.
We've examined the massive scale of the county budget, the existing layers of oversight, the OIG, the audits, the awards.
The compliance part seems okay.
Right. But critically, we looked at the documented areas highlighted in the sources where transparency and efficiency have been questioned. From those serious OIG findings on allegations like bid tampering and falsifying records,
Which really raise eyebrows.
to the lack of itemized bills for significant legal fees, concerns about contract management, external policy threats like that TDT situation.
And that very direct call to stop inflating personnel costs by eliminating unnecessary vacant positions.
Exactly. And the sources collectively argue that a proactive, dedicated DOGE-type deep dive isn't just an optional exercise, it's essential. Essential for strategic optimization and enhanced transparency.
It's about ensuring that during this period of rapid growth and financial strain, every taxpayer dollar is truly providing maximum value. And, just as importantly, being managed in a way that builds, rather than erodes, public trust.
Yeah. This isn't abstract government finance. It directly impacts your household budget, the quality of the services you receive as a resident, and ultimately your trust in how your local government is stewarding your money.
So here's a final thought to leave you with, based on everything we've discussed from these sources. Given the detailed points raised from the OIG's findings on issues like bid tampering and falsifying records, to the very specific example of the lack of an itemized bill for significant legal fees, to that explicit suggestion that eliminating vacant positions is a necessary way to stop the inflation of personnel costs, what single area do you think St. Johns County should scrutinize first to build greater trust and demonstrate true fiscal efficiency for its residents? Where would you start?